My name is Sharon Cooke. I'm the business owner and curator, and I feel honoured to be the business owner and curator at Andromeda Botanical Gardens. Started by one of the greatest gardeners and scientists ever, Iris Banicki, as a private garden. She did this for herself way back from 1954, so it's over 70 years old. I've been here since February 2014. It's always been an idea of mine to curate a space that's concerned with native plants. The years went by and I realised how important plants and plant use is to the people of Barbados. And I'm thinking, well, we need to show this. We need to celebrate it. And luckily enough, in 2021, Sandals Foundation contacted me and asked me if I had any specific projects that were community focused. And I said, yeah, I want to create an ethnobotanical garden all about how we use plants in Barbados. We had so much help. It was absolutely amazing. So we created it in 2022, opened it in December 2022, and we just created a completely wonderful landscape. Now, there was an area, say a third of an acre, that we had piled all the debris from the creation of the garden, and we asked locals who came and they saw this garden, they saw signs about how we in Barbados use plants, and I said to them, okay, what do you want to see? What did you enjoy the most about being in this space that's dedicated to how we use plants? And they said to me they love to see the butterflies. We decided to create a butterfly haven, which over time turned into a pollinator zone. Again, we got funding from the Rotary Club of Barbados South. So we created this pollinator zone, which is where I'm sitting now. Other things we've created are the ground, which celebrates the plants used by the enslaved, and we're just about to create the African Connections Garden, about plants that somehow have a connection to the African continent. There's a plant that we use actively here called giant Mexican sunflower, Tithonia diversifolia, which is native to Mexico. 15 years ago, when I was teaching here garden design, somebody asked me about a flower, the name of it, and I didn't know, so I had to research it. And although it's native to Mexico, in Africa they use it extensively as a fertilizer because it's got nitrogen, potassium and phosphorus. So we use it actively. And of course it's not native to Africa, it's native to Mexico, but there's the connection where so many communities in the African continent do actually use it. So that's going to be in the African Connections Garden. But one of my favourite plants is the seaside sage, which is the botanical name is Croton flavans. Now, this was used by the enslaved as a wound healer. Great. But I was given a tour to a local Barbadian gentleman who's my age, in his 50s, possibly a little bit older. And he said to me, as a child growing up in the 1970s in Barbados, he'd go out with his friends, he'd come back with all scrapes, and his parents would send him back to the bush to get seaside sage to put on his wounds. And I love that, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years, the same use, and it's still used in that way now. I mean, that is so worth celebrating and so worth talking about. Other little surprises are plantains. Now, plantains have been in Africa for anywhere between 2,000 and 5,000 years. And of course, it's yummy, right? But the enslaved people used it to treat eye inflammation. Again, isn't that amazing? So that's in the ground, but it's also going to be part of our African Connections Garden as well. And there are so many plants with these wonderful histories and these wonderful cultural uses in Barbados that we need to talk about. What I have found is when you go to gardens all over the world, so many of them are ornamental, and there's nothing wrong with ornamental gardens. They are beautiful. But there are so many cultures all over the world, even in Europe, whose ancestors used plants. And I'm thinking, why isn't that shown? It needs to be shown and it needs to be celebrated because it's something, all these stories need to be told because they're so interesting and they're really, really, really enriching to the garden experience. So this patch here is one of my favourite patches because of this tiny, tiny blue. That tiny blue butterfly. So I'm just going to gently move this to see if others come out. That's a little sulphur. These two tiny yellows are called little sulphurs. So we created this just to see which butterflies would come here because we really wanted a Hanno blue, and the Hanno blue is here. It might be quite difficult to pick out, But when we noticed the Hanno blue, I tell you, there we go. We just got so excited because that's the reason why we left this patch quite wild. So it's not a specific plant, but we left this wild because we hoped we would get that little Hanno blue. All right, so we're going to walk up this way to the patch of Spanish needles. And if you think about the destruction of Barbados, the colonisation, that 300 years of monoculture, and the habitat destruction, I think it's so nice to celebrate those plants that were used by the enslaved people of Barbados, which have links to our past thousands of years and how we use plants. But it also gives havens for all these butterflies which would have suffered, all the wildlife that would have suffered with colonisation and habitat destruction. So not only are you remembering our ancestors by planting these species, you're also giving a little bit of a haven for all the wildlife that depend on these species. Look at the amount of butterflies on here. Gulf fritillaries. You have buckeyes. What else? Skippers. Sulphur. So 4 different species even without trying. Monarchs. 5 different species. Southern whites. Did I say that already? I'm not even sure. 5, 6 different species of butterfly just in this patch of Spanish needles, which is a species of bidens, B-I-D-E-N-S. All right, so we love this so much. Remember, this is part of the ground. Plants used medicinally by the enslaved. Bidens, Spanish needles, was used as a wound healer. And we love this area so much that we're going to make even more of it across the other side there. Here, the ground we have celebrates the plants used medicinally by the enslaved. So I wanted a traditional name to call this area of the Ethnobotanical Garden. So the ground celebrates who we are and who we used to be. And of course, that history doesn't just start with the enslaved. Although it's celebrating the plants used by the enslaved, it actually goes back to our time in Africa, and maybe some of us our time in Europeans, those who have European ancestry. So it really is a celebration of our past. The thing about the ground and the wider Andromeda, we don't use any chemicals in the garden. Our ancestors never used chemicals in the garden. We planted species that we used. Or we went into the ground, or we went into the bush to find plants that we used. One of those plants again is the Spanish needles, which has those annoying little prickles that stick onto your clothes and you distribute them all over the place. The enslaved use that as a wound healer, right? So 1, the enslaved use it as a wound healer. 2, a lot of us refer it at these days as just bush. But when we have those plants, we shouldn't think of them as annoying. In a way, we should be celebrating them because our ancestors used them. So I think we need to look again at plants that are considered just bush. Seaside sage, which is this one here. So this one was the one that was used as a wound healer, and that when I was given the guided tour to the local gentleman, he said his parents sent him back to get this to put on his wounds. Really fabulous. If we keep walking, just be careful here. This is Catharanthus. It's not actually local, but it's a local favourite. And I'm sure already pharmaceutical companies have already isolated the compounds. It's got a whole range of health benefits. Pride of Barbados. Now this is, to me, is a really interesting plant because it's the national flower of Barbados. I'm not sure if the authorities are aware of its full history. And sometimes when you study a plant, you can almost study the history of a people. It used to be called flower fence because it was used as a boundary by so many people in Barbados. The leaves steeped in water as a nutritious drink. The young peas in the pods, not the pods, the young peas, people would just nibble on, they just eat as a little sweet snack. I have heard women would use parts of the plant to help regulate their periods. Also, and this is not to be seen as good, bad, nothing, it's just a fact, women used it to induce abortions. All right, and parts of the plant were considered so toxic that some people even used it to commit suicide. Now, with all those facts about this plant, I think it's a curious choice to have as our national flower. Undoubtedly beautiful, not necessarily native to Barbados, but an interesting flower, and I think it's a really good illustration of a plant that you can really see the history of a people just by studying the history of its use. And there are others, the poppagun tree, for example, which some people call the trumpet tree, a species of Cecropia. You know, a lot of the Rastafari community use the dried leaves as shampoo. Fantastic, celebrate it. It's something that we should know about. But it's also native to the region, including Barbados, and it's also used by the Orion butterfly, which is a huge butterfly, brown and orange, incredible. You know, and it's a lovely, lovely tree, which is light, you know, it hasn't got a heavy canopy. So it's another plant that has the dual use, used by ourselves and also used by the wildlife. And I'm trying to think of another species. Oh, the Christmas candles. Christmas candles, okay, flowers from about December all the way through till March. We use it traditionally as a cure for certain types of fungal infections, all right, ringworm, for example. It's also used as a laxative. Some of you might even know the brand Senecot. So the botanical name of this plant is Senna alata. Wonderful. Guess what? It's also the host plant for the sulphur butterflies. The sulphurs in amongst the Christmas candle plants. And the sulphurs are interesting because the colours vary from almost white to the hottest, brightest yellow. And they're all the same species. So very, very variable colours. This is the food colouring, Bixa orellana. So in Barbados, some people will add it to their oils. I'll just show you. So look at my thumb, and then I just go like that. Okay. Used all over the world as a food colouring. Used by the original inhabitants of this region too. Long history of ethnobotanical uses. And those huge, actually this is a good plant, those huge carpenter bees, they love the flowers on this. So when this is flowering, carpenter bees tend to be solitary, right? When this is flowering, there must be, I don't know, 100 carpenter bees in this part of the garden. And they make the loudest noise. So, you know, sometimes it surprises me, I'm walking and it's like, oh my God. It's amazing, absolutely amazing, so many. So it really is a haven. I mean, look at all of this. So we've got bloodroot, used traditionally for all sorts of health reasons. So on this deck here, we've got a combination of plants like this, which we've planted for the bees and the butterflies, as well as things like this. This is a lantana that grows close to the ocean. People don't tend to see this one, but we call it sage in Barbados, of course. This is a species of lantana, but if you look at the difference between the leaf, so I've taken this leaf off just to show you the difference between this lantana and the one that we commonly know. See, completely different. This has got a rounded edge to it and it smells different too. All right. So two different lantanas. They're both members of the Verbenaceae family, and the Verbenaceae family, so many of the plants are attractive to butterflies and bees, hence why we've decided to use a lot of that family in this ethnobotanical garden. So another member of the Verbenaceae family is the Duranta, golden dewdrop, a favourite for so many people in Barbados. You get these lovely purple scented flowers, followed by, these will become orange berries. Now the berries are toxic, all right, but with lots of plants that are toxic, they do have some medicinal uses, and there are documented accounts of people using this plant in medicinal ways, okay? But a fantastic plant. Why is it here? Hummingbirds love it, butterflies love it. Bees probably love it too, but I haven't seen as many bees on this. But definitely the monarchs for sure, and the hummingbirds absolutely love this plant, a native plant, member of the verbena family. in my little dreams, I have this kind of like image of people not using chemicals in their garden because they want butterflies. And you can do it, and you have to be patient, okay? But it's so worthwhile doing. Planting something that's native, because if you see around me, you see lots of butterflies, and they are around all these supposedly exotics. A lot of these are native to Mexico, to be honest, tropical Mexico at that, or subtropical Mexico, and the butterflies are on them, and it's great, and they're pretty, and we are a botanical garden, and we do get visitors, and people like to see all this wonderful colour. So we've chosen species that people like and that butterflies like. But there are also so many species that might not be as colourful, but they're still beautiful, and the butterflies love them, and if you have loads of them, it creates an impact, and you will enjoy the memories, our ancestral memories, and you will enjoy the butterflies using them today. I think I need to make a garden that has plants that are used by both us and wildlife, and it'll just be something so wonderful and so beautiful, and that can easily be replicated in people's gardens generally in Barbados.